Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, I Did What My Mum Told Me to Do, and Got Revenge. Disclaimer, this story is not meant to belittle single mothers nor people with mental illness, and yes, I do love my mum, but this was a story about how things can come back to bite you. So just some backstory here. My parents divorced when I was just in kindergarten, so no more than 6. My mum got full custody of us and she suffered from mental illness. I believe she has borderline personality disorder, and she was also a typical narcissistic parent. Anyway, ever since the divorce she would always tell us how it was not her fault we didn't have enough money for things and blame my dad. Example, if there was nothing to eat for breakfast and we complained like small children do when they were hungry, she snapped, "It's your father's fault, so cry to him." I just learned never to complain and do without, and spent my childhood taking care of her. My sister and I were trained from when I was about 8, my sister 10, to come right home from school and do our homework and clean the house and take care of ourselves. Don't ask mum to make dinner, make it yourself, and all of the chores so mum doesn't have to do anything. It sounds bizarre, but we thought that was normal, as well as being hit and told on a daily basis that we were worthless. It got worse my senior year of high school. My grandma died a few months before that summer and my mum quit her job and blew through the money my grandma left her before the summer was over. This was close to $75,000 back in 2000. She refused to get another job and kept coming up with excuses not to work, i.e., I need a break. Get off my back. I hurt my leg, etc., while she was going out drinking with her friend and acting like a carefree teenager. So I spent my senior year working hard at school, at my part-time job after school, and pretty much taking care of an overgrown child who refused to work or help out. Anytime a utility shut off or there was no food left in the house, she just griped, "You have a job. Why can't you pay it?" If I brought up the fact that my dad sent her child support, she would just complain that she had my sister's tuition, which I later learned was BS. She would flaunt that child support check and laugh and refer to it as "mommy's paycheck." Flash forward to when I am about to choose a college and my mum keeps bellyaching about the costs and of course has zero saved in a college fund. I couldn't afford a private university since I only was offered a partial scholarship, so I decided to go to a reasonably priced and still highly regarded state university. My freshman year I was pretty much able to swing the cost of tuition and room and board. I lived on campus. Since last year of high school I filed my taxes and FAFSA as soon as my W-2s came in, so I had a decent amount of grants. During my first year of college, I almost became unable to receive financial aid for my second year of college. Why? My W-2s were mailed to my home address and my mum, being the caring and supportive mother she was, shredded them and threw them in the trash. I found out because my sister was home that weekend and saw it. My mum denied, and when I came home for spring break and pressed her for it, she lied and said her friend had them. Her friend was a CPA. My sister called my mum out on this bluff by calling the friend, who said she did not have any of our tax information. She was very concerned and told me and my sister to request duplicate W-2s and have them sent home, and she will have my mum send them over to me. My mum was upset that we had checked with her friend and called her out on her bluff, but true to her word, her friend did my taxes for me and my FAFSA. I had offered to pay her or at least babysit for her, but she told me it was okay. I think she knew my mum was mentally unstable and felt sorry for me and my sister. At this point I learned that my mum had not been helping out my sister at all with tuition like she claimed, and my sister had mentioned it to my dad, who had called her out and demanded to know where the child support was going to. My mum insisted he wasn't paying her enough and that's why she couldn't help us out. During my second year of college my W-2s were once again sent home and my mum once again, accidentally, threw them in trash. I had to request duplicate W-2s from my summer job not just once but twice because she kept throwing them in the trash. I filed my tax return late that year, and as a result my FAFSA was filed late, so I wasn't able to get the full amount I was receiving before. Anytime I complained to her about money or no food in the house, it was, "Complain to your father." Well, the summer before my 3rd year I was burned out on my mum's BS. I was working full-time for the summer and saving as much as I could, but she was refusing to help me out at all while I was home with food or anything. She was upset that instead of paying the phone bill so she could make long-distance calls to her online friends and spend all day in chat rooms, this was back when we had dial-up, I had the audacity to spend my hard-earned money on a cell phone and pay that bill myself. She told everyone I should just drop out because I wasn't apply myself hard enough. I was in the honors program, and she would play martyr with all her friends about it's so hard when you have kids in college and they eat your out of house and home and come to you for money. At the end of the summer I had saved $1,000, but the school won't let me move into the dorm unless I paid 50% up front, which I was about $10K. I didn't know what to do, as all summer the university had told me I was fine and then on move-in day told me I couldn't move into the dorm. I called my dad in a panic and he spoke to someone who agreed to give me 24 hours. I moved in and the next day my dad showed up first thing with a coffee and a donut for me and told me not to worry, he was going to fix this once and for all. We went from office to office on campus and he co-signed a loan, which he later paid off for me, and then he paid the balance on my tuition for the loan didn't cover. He then took me out to lunch and told me the truth. My mum never helped my sister with her tuition. My sister had graduated the summer before my junior year of college. My sister later confirmed this but was not surprised my mum had lied. My dad had co-signed loan to help my sister out, which he later paid off for her, and my sister was able to get a scholarship and do COOP to pay for her last 2 years. He also advised me that my mum was not so poorly off. As part of the divorce settlement he had to pay the mortgage and property taxes on our house, and even though my sister was now out on her own he was still paying her the same amount of child support of about $2K a month, despite the fact that I was living on campus for 75% of the year and my mum was not giving me a dime. Just to give you some clarification, my tuition and room and board before financial aid kicked in was $15K a year, so she could have easily helped me out with school, since after financial aid kicked in, when I was able to get it, the balance was usually $6K. I was hurt to think my mum was just living off my child support and constantly making me feel guilty for wanting anything or for not being able to cater to her every whim. She would get upset that I wouldn't come home on the weekends to help her clean the house that I was not living in. I thought about how bad she made me feel growing up and made me feel worthless when in fact, had it not been for me or my sister she would have not had a roof over her head after the divorce. He asks me to grant him access to my account so he could prove my mum was not paying for college and that I was. He asked me how I would feel if he took care of college instead of paying my mum child support. Sounded good to me. He even told me I could spend my breaks at his house instead of my mum's. I called my mum and told her that my dad had taken care of the issue and she had no remorse. She told me it was my own fault for not planning my finances better and for pissing away my money all summer. I just played it dumb and said she was right, but pointed out I had done what she told me to do and complained to my dad. A month later my mum called me up very upset. My dad had spoken with the courts and there was going to be a hearing in their divorce case. My dad had proven that my mum had not been paying for mine nor my sister's tuition for college, and that was the very reason my dad was obligated to pay child support till I was done college. Since I was living on campus, it didn't make sense to pay her child support when I was not living at home most of the year and she was given me 1 penny. My dad told the judge he would gladly pay for me to finish college, but he was not going to pay my mum any more child support, no pay the mortgage on the house. If my mum didn't want to take over the mortgage, they could sell the house and I could live with him over my breaks. My mum was freaking out over this and calling me selfish. I just reminded her that my tuition must cost a lot more than what she got in child support, since she was never able to help me with costs of school. She just kept laying guilt trips on me about how I was selfish because she didn't get to go to college right after high school and how she never got to have 4 carefree years of college. I pointed out to her that she had not worked since my grandma died about 3 years ago and that I was working and going to school at that time while she got to live a carefree life. She pretty much ripped me a new one at that point. She tried to get back at my dad by not paying utilities on the house to make it seem like she needed the money. She then told me that the electric and water were now shut off, so if I wanted to come home for winter break I needed to help her out. She had moved in with her boyfriend at his condo. I just told her that I would miss her but that I would just go to my dad's for winter break. She was upset and cried about how selfish I was for not wanting to come home for Christmas. Side note, the Christmas before my present was throwing out many of my personal belongings. Why? My mum was pissed off at me that I didn't want to come home one weekend to help her clean. Because to get home I had to take 2 buses, 2 trains, spend $20 one way and wait for her to hopefully remember to pick me up at the train station, which was a whole 20-minute drive for her after I had traveled for 4 to 5 hours, because I had finals and I told her I would help clean for the holidays once I came home for winter break. Her response? She took all of my things, threw them in boxes and threw them out on the front lawn. Most of my things were destroyed by being left on in the rain and I away most of them. I told my mum that I would come and visit her over my winter break once she got the utilities turned on. I told my dad what was going on and he said he and my stepmom and my half-brother and sister were thrilled I was going to stay with them for winter break and he can get me a job in his office as well for winter break. He also called my mum and reminded her that the child support had not stopped, and they were going to list the house in a few months, so what was this nonsense about the utilities being shut off? She was upset but magically came up with the money to turn them back on. That spring my dad officially, by the court, took over my college tuition and he even made sure I got my full financial aid since he had picked up W-2s for me. My mum lost her child support and was told by the judge that she better cooperate with the sale of the house and keep up with the utility bills etc. so it would sell. Her boyfriend moved in with her till the house sold and she moved to another time zone. The real kicker? It was cheaper for my dad to pay college costs than to pay her child support. To summarize, my mum abused and exploited me and I got my revenge by causing her to lose her child support and free rent by doing what she told me to do for years, complain to my father. No regrets. Next one is titled, He Speaks for the Trees. This is juicy, so get ready. Background information: we live in an old and big manor that has been split into 3 attached houses. The houses are about 150 years old and were built around 5 huge giant sequoias which were about 200 years old. In the UK, giant sequoias are very rare and the 2 in our garden up the house price by about £60,000. We lived next to 2 really nice neighbours, one young couple and one old couple. The story: unfortunately, our old neighbours passed away, so their child and her family moved in. Let's call her Jo. Jo was instantly a pain in the neck. We had been sharing chickens with the previous neighbors and Jo agreed to keep sharing them. However, on her nights she would constantly forget to put them away, so we would have to check them every night anyway. One night her little brats thought it would be funny to open our personal duck pen in the night, which leads to a mass slaughter. Later the chickens went the same way. About 2 years ago there was a storm and one of her sequoias somehow fell over and died. They were distraught, understandably, but from then on, the jealousy started. She would constantly complain about how lucky we were to have 2 sequoias in our garden and how our sequoia was making too much shade in their garden. It wasn't. Anyway, we just thought it was Jo being a pain. There were a few dry threats like they will chop it down or maybe the next storm will blow it down. Until we came back from a holiday to France to find a huge 6-meter stump and nothing else. I mean, how the heck do you get rid of a 100-foot tree in like 2 weeks? 2 of our old British oak trees had been crushed as well. My mum and sisters were crying, my dad were red in the face, and we had no evidence Jo had done it. She claimed that there had been a storm and she had to get rid of it. We had a security camera at the front of the house, but you can get in the back if you go through a few fields. We then were given an £8,000 bill for damages to her property, and to have the tree chopped up and removed the wood alone would have been worth a small fortune. We had lost all hope and 2 weeks had passed when my dad came running in from the garden. We had put up a wildlife camera a few months ago and had caught everything. We got a lawyer on the phone and started our revenge. Carrot. We got a tree surgeon out who said it was an original specimen brought into the UK in 1860 along with the 2 that were in Elveston Castle Country Park. There were 218 around the UK but only 60 now. He also told us to call out an engineer because the roots might be in the foundation, so when they rot it could damage the house. Turns out we would need to redo the foundations. Then we took Joe to court and sued them for damage to property, trespassing and lots of other smaller claims. The tree would cost $250K to have another Sequoia that was 200 years put in and looked after. It's basically impossible, plus the damage to the foundation, which was $200K, and the 2 oaks, which were another $25K. So with the smaller claims, it went to about £500,000, $700,000. They had to move out. And we have now paid off the mortgage, done a lovely loft and kitchen conversion, and have basically done up the house and garden, as well as plant a 60-year-old Sequoia tree in the back garden. We also had our kitchen counter and table made from the old Sequoia. We now have a new lovely family living next to us who we share chickens, ducks and pygmy goats with. They're very nice and I make a fortune babysitting their kids. Many of you wanted to hear about the court case, but she didn't stand a chance, and as soon as we revealed the footage to her and her lawyer, she gave up. The people who cut the tree down gave us the countertops for free as a sorry. They were truly sorry. The neighbors had a second home, so they just sold the house and moved back to their smaller one. We feel bad for the old neighbors, but we do visit their graves because they were like family. Last one is titled, I Help Someone Get Revenge on Their Gold Digging Arsive and So. This happened some years ago, but was just reminded of it. I worked as a front desk agent in a large luxury hotel chain for some years. One particular hotel I worked at was located really close to the downtown area, and so we got a large number of young, very wealthy, business people who loved to party. I usually worked the second and third shifts, which meant I got to see loads of drunken hookups, breakups, cheating, hookers, and more. This particular one though, this is one I will never forget. I was working at the desk when a group of young, well-dressed men come walking in. They've all clearly been drinking, but aren't so drunk that they can't walk right and hold a conversation. One of them comes up to me and tells me that while he and his friends were at the bar, a woman was hitting on him, and even though he told her no multiple times, she wouldn't stop. So he and his friends left, and it wasn't until they got in the Uber that he realized he didn't have his room key anymore. He thinks she took it and he's concerned that she may come up to his room. He asked that I deactivate his keys, and if she does come up to the hotel, to not let her in. When he was telling me all of this, it didn't sit right with me. He and his friends were all grinning about it and snickering amongst one another. Then he gave a clear description of her, without being asked. Told me height, body shape, hair color, and style, the kind of dress she was wearing. All while saying it in a mocking tone. Now, this could have easily been because he thought the whole thing was ridiculous or was too drunk to take it seriously, but it really didn't sound right to me. Either way, I did as I was trained in that situation. I pulled up his reservation, deactivated the keys as requested, made him a new set when he showed me his ID, and even offered to move him to a new room if that would make him feel more comfortable. He and his buddies all laughed a little at that, and he declined, took the keys, and they went to their room. About an hour or so later, the woman he described showed up. Now, by this point, my relief for the night had also shown up and was sitting at the front desk while I was in the back office counting down my cash drawer. I hadn't had a chance to tell him about the woman. Just as I'm walking out of the back office with my bag and about to leave, I see my coworker buzz the doors open and the woman comes rushing in, cuts through the lobby and down the hall to the elevators. She was barefoot, holding her heels in her hands, and knew exactly where she was going. I rushed up to him and told him what the man from before had told me about her. My coworker looked at me confused. He then pointed to the screen that had the reservation pulled up and told me that when the woman arrived, she went to use the room keys and they didn't work. So he asked for her room number and last name. She gave both and her name is on the reservation. I looked at the reservation and down in the notes, there was a woman's name listed. The man from before was listed as the primary, but her name was listed as secondary with his consent to be in the room. I was confused. I thought maybe she wasn't the same woman he was talking about. But, to be on the safe side, I called the man in his room and told him the situation and that we allowed a woman, fitting that description he gave, to enter the building because she confirmed her name was on the room. He laughed, said he forgot her name was on the room and asked that I remove it. I was now super confused. I asked to make sure. Me, sir, just to be clear, the woman you met at the bar tonight was with you at check-in hours ago and was allowed keys then, but now she is not. Him, laughs to all his friends in the room, or, guys, I confused the poor girl. Gets back on the phone with me, yeah sweetheart, she's banned from the room. Don't worry about the other details, just take her name off. Me, I see. Then, if she isn't going to be on the room anymore, would you like us to call the police and have her removed from the property? Him, ha ha ha, whoa. That's too far there. Don't worry, she'll get the hint soon enough. We ended the call there and I got really suspicious of this. I told my coworker to not do anything and that I was going to stick around for a bit to see if anything happened. A short time later the woman came off the elevator, pouring tears, sobbing while on the phone with someone. She sat down in our lobby and my coworker and I tried to look busy while eavesdropping hard on her phone call. She was sobbing on the phone to her mum and sister. From what she told them, she was invited out to spend the week with her boyfriend meeting all of his old college buddies. This being their first night, they all met up for dinner and drinks. After a bit, she went to the restroom and when she came back she caught her boyfriend hitting on another woman. His friends all bet that he wouldn't do it. When she confronted him pissed off, he called her a bunch of names and humiliated her in front of his friends and the entire bar. All of his friends joined in on mocking her and he threw in her face that she was nothing without him and dumped her right there. He and his friends then took an Uber back and left her stranded at the bar with no money and no way back. She then had to use her phone's GPS and walk back to the hotel from the bar, barefoot. She had heels, and walking 2 miles in those was not going to cut it. She was asking her mum and sister for help as he wouldn't let her in the room to get her luggage or her wallet. My heart broke. I felt horrible. I helped this guy treat this poor woman like crap and now he and all his friends were up there laughing at her while she's sitting in our lobby sobbing and with nothing. I went over to our snacks area in the lobby, grabbed her a bottled water, and brought it to her. I told her that I couldn't help but overhear the conversation and was very sorry for her situation and asked if she would like us to help. I informed her that if he was keeping her from getting to her things, we could call the police and have them force him to hand over her things so she could leave if she'd like. Or if she wanted to let her mum or sister pay for a room, we'd be happy to give her a very low rate in a room far from him. She thanked me, took the water, and tried to calm down and talk to me about what all was happening and what her options were. Eventually, we decided on her staying in the hotel for the night and figuring out the rest in the morning. As we make it to the desk, she asks me to try and run her credit card to see if it has enough on it for another room. I ask her what she means by another room, and she tells me that she's actually paying for the room he's in. That his name is on the room because he booked it, but it's her card paying for everything. This intrigued me. I asked why she was paying for the room if it was in his name. She told me that she's the one with a job, not him. That he hasn't been able to find a job in his field since graduating from college and is essentially living off of his parents' money. But just after they started dating, his parents cut him off, so he's been living off of her money. That's why she was so upset and confused by how he had been acting all night. He was sweet and doing everything for her back home, but since he met up with his friends he did a 180 and hasn't been the same guy the entire time. I wanted to tell her that it was obvious he was using her for the money and that he would probably blame his friends for all of this and try to get back with her later on. But I doubted she would have listened to me or cared for a complete stranger to butt in on her personal life like that. So instead, I offered up a sweet piece of revenge. I informed her that, considering she's the one paying for the room, if she can confirm that it is her card on file with some sort of photo ID and verify the last 4 digits of the card number, that's honestly all this hotel company required, then she could, if she wanted to, kick him out of the room and keep it all to herself. But, considering how poorly her night has been, if she were indeed able to prove she is the one paying for the room, then I'd be more than happy to provide for her the biggest luxury upgrade we offered at our property. Largest suite we had, full hotel amenity access. I'd even have my coworker fish out a bottle of champagne and some fresh strawberries for her to have sent to her room. All free of charge. She was taken aback by the offer and was very sincerely tempted. She looked like she was about to say no. Then I told her that since she would be upgrading her room, that would require moving her things from that room and into her new one. which mean the room that she is currently listed in would need to be vacated immediately. If anyone were to remain in the room after we have demanded it be vacated, we are required to have them escorted off the property or they pay for the room. Their choice. She then thought about it, pulled up her card's banking app and showed me the screen. It had a photo of her full name, the card's full number, and the hold from our hotel for the room. She asked if that worked. It was good enough for me. I quickly upgraded her, moved everything over in the system, and before I could say a word to my coworker, he was already grabbing a set of master keys, a bell cart, and was asking her what her luggage looked like since he would be the one retrieving it for her to deliver to her room. He didn't want her to have to deal with her ex again. She smiled and told him which ones were hers and that she hadn't unpacked yet. My coworker runs down to the elevators and up to fetch her things, while I make her a new set of keys and send her off to her new room. Once she's on the elevator, my phone at the desk starts ringing. It's the ex-boyfriend and he's very angry about why my coworker has entered the room and is taking her things. I calmly explain that I cannot give out the private information of any of our guests and that if he would like to remain in his room he will need to pay for it as there is no longer a method of payment on his room. He blew up. He's making a ton of demands and at the same time yelling at my coworker to stop what he's doing, but it's obvious from the way he's yelling at him that my coworker isn't listening to him. I can even hear the guy's friends telling him to chill out and just pay for the room. I then explain that we will give him a courtesy 10 minutes to make a decision. At which point, if he doesn't have payment ready then he must vacate the building or we will be forced to call the authorities and have him evicted. He continues to yell at me. He screams, swears, threatens, and yells for a solid minute before taking a breath. I then tell him he has 9 minutes remaining and asks if he has come to a decision yet. He hangs up on me. 9 minutes later I call the room and he doesn't answer. I call again, no answer. I call a third time, he picks up then immediately hang up. I call the police and tell them what's going on and they said they're on their way. The officers arrive, I tell them what's going on, we go up to the room together and the man and his friends are all white as ghosts when they see the cops. The cops explain to the ex-boyfriend and his friends that they're being evicted. The ex-boyfriend starts trying to talk to me but the cops stop him and tell him to only talk to them. I told him about his attitude on the phone before. The friends are all offering to pay for the room at this point and the cops look to me and ask if that would be acceptable. I smile very sweetly and say, no, and the cops nod and start rushing all of the guys to grab their things and leave the room. The ex-boyfriend is the last one out the door carrying his 2 bags and complaining that he isn't even given a luggage cart and has to carry his own things. His friends all look upset at him. I go with the officers to escort all of them out of the building and run into my coworker in the lobby. He waits until they're all outside in the parking lot to tell me that the woman is in her new room, loves it, and said no to the champagne, she just wanted to sleep. I didn't get to see her before she left town the next day, but the ex-boyfriend did try calling our hotel to complain a number of times and even tried leaving some bad reviews of us online and lied through all of it. I hope she doesn't have to ever deal with him again. Edit. Wanted to address some things you guys brought up in the comments. 1. I have no idea why she didn't use Uber instead of walking, probably due to the distress of the moment and didn't think of it. Honestly, if you're ever in that situation, despite being publicly humiliated like that, ask the staff for help. Either they think of something you're too panicked to think of or they'll be nice and pay for an Uber for you. I've done it for people plenty when working in hotels. There's no shame in asking for help. 2. The credit card company is Capital One. I wasn't going to mention it since some subs immediately flag your story for listing major company names and didn't want to fuss with that. But yeah, their app lets you post a picture on your profile and, on most banking and credit card apps you are able to pull up the full card number by clicking on the account information. Yes, technically I shouldn't have accepted this as a form of ID, however, given how crap her night was, I didn't care. Thanks for listening.